Mid-Atlantic/Mid-East. A ridge of surface high pressure is building into the Mid-Atlantic region, bringing mostly dry conditions through at least midweek. Winds are elevated from the west to northwest, with gusts in many areas reaching 15 to 25 knots this afternoon. Relative humidity values are dropping into the 20 to 35% range under the dry air mass. This setup raises an elevated fire weather risk, especially west of major urban centers where fuels are dry and winds strong. Overnight, skies remain clear, radiational cooling will be efficient, and lows drop into the 30s for many inland locations. Looking upstream, a warm front is poised to push north on Wednesday ahead of a stronger cold front later in the week, but today remains quiet and stable. From an aviation perspective, VFR conditions dominate, with gusty surface winds the primary concern. The dry low RH environment may enhance turbulence in the lower boundary layer, especially with mixing from daytime heating. For meteorologists, the key driver is the building western high-pressure ridge and the advection of dry continental air, limiting moisture and cloud development. Southeast/Carolina coastal plain. In the Carolinas and coastal plain, surface high pressure will dominate through the day, while a dry cold front approaches for later in the evening. Tonight, the potential for patchy frost exists inland due to light winds, clear skies, and strong radiative cooling. But advisory criteria are not yet met. Tomorrow, ahead of the front, southwest winds will strengthen to 20 to 30 miles per hour, with gusts possibly to 35 miles per hour. With temperatures warming to perhaps the low to mid-70s and RH values falling into the 30 to 40% range, increased fire danger is forecast in some Piedmont zones with drier fuels. Flight operations in this region will be generally smooth today, though gusty prefrontal winds and low-level mixing may create boundary layer turbulence. For weather analysis, the critical mechanism is the tightening pressure gradient ahead of the approaching system combined with dry continental air and the lack of recent rainfall that contributes to elevated fire weather risk. Florida/Gulf Coast and Deep South. Across Florida and the Gulf Coast, while full AFDS for all locations are not reviewed here, the pattern is one of relatively tranquil conditions, with high-pressure influence and weak frontal activity. With little synoptic forcing overhead, moisture is modest and surface winds light to moderate. In coastal Gulf areas, sea breeze effects may dominate development of diurnal convective activity, though given modest instability and no significant upper-level support, widespread convection is unlikely. From a flight standpoint, meteorologists and pilots should monitor any localized sea breeze convergence zones, but major weather threats are absent. The large-scale control by the subtropical ridge and the lack of strong forcing favor a benign environment at this time. Western U.S. Intermountain region. Although specific AFDS were not reviewed here, the broader pattern across the West is that of upper-level ridging and dry air over much of the interior, with weak shortwave troughs embedded in the westerly flow occasionally nudging into the northern Rockies. Given the seasonality and the large-scale pattern, aviation concerns revolve around mountain wave turbulence, downslope wind regimes, and elevated fire weather risk where dryness persists. Meteorologically, the combination of persistent ridging, subsiding air, and limited dynamics suppresses widespread precipitation. The geography of the mountains amplifies local effects such as downslope gusts, and lee side warming drying. Nationwide highlights and implications. The dominant theme today is dry, stable air under high pressure in the eastern U.S., with gusty winds and low humidity promoting fire weather concerns in select zones. The transition zone ahead of the next cold front is beginning to tighten pressure gradients in the southeast and mid-Atlantic, signaling increased wind and mixing potential. For aviation, turbulence risk remains modest, but mixed layer gustiness should be expected, especially in the Piedmont and inland zones. Radiational cooling overnight will enhance frost fog potential in sheltered inland sites. From a climatological perspective, this pattern is consistent with early November. The subtropical ridge in retreat, continental high pressure building, and frontal systems beginning to intrude with increasing frequency. The mechanisms today: subsidence under the ridge, advection of dry continental air, and pressure gradient forcing ahead of frontal zones are classic mid-latitude features for this time of year. Geographically, the inland Piedmonts and plains are the areas of greatest concern for dryness, fuels, while coastal zones benefit from proximity to the ocean, higher dew points, and sea breeze moderating influences. Bottom line for operators: unless you are operating in fire-sensitive inland zones of the Mid-Atlantic or Piedmont, where dry fuels combine with gusty winds, today is a relatively benign day weather-wise. For flights, expect VFR conditions, surface gusts, especially in the afternoon near frontal margins, and good radiational cooling overnight. For meteorology, focus on monitoring wind/height trends, fuel dryness indices, and the next frontal boundary, which will bring increased complexity later in the week.